He said his father had only cried once in his whole life, as far as anyone in the family could remember. He said it happened when he was 6 years old, in a school parking lot, after a kindergarten assembly where he had sung 2 lines of a song nobody had asked him to sing twice. He said his father didn't cry at funerals, didn't cry at weddings, didn't cry when his own father died. Just that once, and it was for this, the boy said. It was for me singing. Simon Cowell looked at him for a long moment. Then the boy said one more thing, quietly, almost as an afterthought, and Simon Cowell, composed, prepared, certain he understood the shape of the story, broke down completely. Another Tuesday night taping. The Dolby Theater in Los Angeles, packed with 3,000 people. Cameras roll, millions watching from home. Another hopeful contestant stepping into the spotlight. Simon Cowell sat at the judge's table in his black shirt, arms crossed, that familiar expression of measured attention in place. He believed, going into this audition, that he knew where the story was headed. He did not. The boy who walked out that night was 16 years old. His name was Marcus Webb. No relation to the family of an earlier season, simply a name the world holds more than once. He went by Quinn. He was from Detroit, Michigan. He was lanky, dark-eyed, dressed plainly, and he carried himself with the particular careful steadiness of someone who has had practice keeping things together in front of people. Terry Crews greeted him warmly. "Quinn, welcome. Tell us about yourself." "I'm 16. From Detroit." He paused. "I've been singing since I was little. My dad's the reason." "What did he do?" "He never pushed me into it. He listened, really listened every time. He still does, in his way." Something in the phrasing made Terry pause. "Is your dad here tonight?" "He's not able to travel anymore," Quinn said. "He has early onset Alzheimer's. He was diagnosed 3 years ago. He was 49. The audience made the particular sound that this kind of sentence produces, not the sharp grief of a death, but something more unsettled, the specific discomfort of a loss that keeps happening without ever fully arriving. Heidi Klum's expression softened into something careful. Howie Mandel nodded slowly, his jaw tight. Sofia Vergara pressed a hand to her chest. "I'm sorry," Terry said. "That's incredibly hard. For both of you." "It is," Quinn said simply. He didn't elaborate further, the way people learn not to elaborate on things that don't have a tidy edge to stop at. "Tell us about your dad," Terry said gently. "What kind of man is he?" "Quiet," Quinn said. "Steady. He worked at a plant for 20 years. Never made a big deal out of anything." He paused. "My mom told me something a few years ago, after the diagnosis. She said there was only one time in his whole life she ever saw him cry. Not at his own father's funeral, not at their wedding, just once." He looked at the judge's table. "I was 6. There was a kindergarten assembly. They had us each say something or sing something, just little stuff, nothing real. I sang 2 lines of a song. I don't even remember what it was. My mom said my dad didn't say anything the whole car ride home. She said he pulled into the driveway and just sat there for a minute, with his hands on the wheel. And then he cried." Quinn paused. "And it was for this. It was for me singing." The room was very quiet. "He doesn't reliably know who I am anymore," Quinn said. "Some days are better than others. I visit every week. Some weeks he asks who I am. Some weeks he calls me by my own name, and I don't know if he knows I'm his son or if he's just remembering a name." He stopped. He held the moment for exactly as long as it needed. "I wanted to sing here," he said, "because singing is the thing that made him cry once, and it might be the only way left to reach whatever's still in there. I don't know if it'll work. I'm doing it anyway." Simon Cowell sat at the judge's table, and his composure, which had been prepared for grief in its more familiar shapes, met something it had not prepared for. The specific ache of a parent who is present and absent simultaneously, lost in increments, available to be visited and unavailable to be truly reached. He pressed his hand to his mouth. His eyes went bright. He broke down completely, without trying to manage it, the way a structure gives when the weight finally exceeds what it was built to carry. He did not reach for the buzzer. He did not stand. He simply sat there, in front of 3,000 people, and the cameras that had never once, in 15 seasons, caught him entirely undone before the music had even started. And let it happen. Howie Mandel sat with his head bowed, both hands pressed together. Heidi Klum had tears moving freely down her face, unchecked. Sofia Vergara sat with one hand over her heart, and the other gripping the edge of the table. To understand what Simon already knew before Quinn finished speaking, you need to understand what had arrived at the production office 9 days earlier. Simon's charitable foundation had, 4 years prior, funded a music therapy initiative across a small network of memory care facilities in the Midwest. Equipment, trained staff. A modest but consistent program built on research showing that musical memory often survives in dementia patients long after other forms of memory have eroded. That a familiar song can sometimes reach a person when almost nothing else can. The science behind it was real, established, documented in peer-reviewed studies long before Simon's foundation ever wrote a check. The part of the brain that holds music sits in a different, often more resilient region than the parts that hold names and faces and the ordinary architecture of a life. It had been a quiet initiative. Simon had not visited any of the facilities personally. He had reviewed a report once a year and approved the renewed funding and moved on to the next thing. The way large quiet acts of generosity sometimes get folded into the ordinary administration of a life that has many obligations competing for attention. One of the facilities receiving that funding was in suburban Detroit. A modest single-story building with a courtyard garden and a piano in the common room that nobody had played in months until the program started. Quinn's father, Daniel Webb, had been a resident there for 8 months. 9 days before the taping, a music therapist at that facility named Renata Ibrahim had reached out to the production company. She explained, carefully and with appropriate professional boundaries, that she had been working with Daniel Webb using personalized music sessions, playing recordings significant to a patient's life, sometimes family voices, sometimes old favorite songs, watching for any flicker of response. She had learned through Quinn's mother that Quinn was auditioning for the show that funded the program that employed her. She thought, if it wasn't inappropriate, that the production team might want to see something. She sent a video, 11 days old, filmed during a regular session with appropriate consent from the family, the kind of consent that families in this situation learn to give carefully, weighing privacy against the small chance that something good might come of sharing it. In the video, Daniel Webb sits in a chair by a window. He is 60 pounds lighter than the photographs in his file from 3 years earlier, his frame diminished in the way the disease diminishes a person long before it finishes its work. He wears a soft gray cardigan. His eyes track slowly, without the quick focus they once had. Renata sits beside him, a tablet in her lap, and she plays a recording, Quinn singing, a voice memo his mother had saved from years ago, before any of this began, of an ordinary evening when Quinn was practicing in his room and didn't know he was being recorded, his voice still high and unformed. A boy's voice working out a melody for no audience at all. For the first 40 seconds, Daniel Webb's face shows nothing legible. The recording continues. Renata waits, the way she has learned to wait through hundreds of sessions where nothing happens, and a handful where everything does. Then, slowly, something moves through his face. His eyes focus in a way they had not been focusing a moment before. His hand, which had been resting still in his lap, lifts slightly, as if reaching toward the sound, fingers curling and uncurling once. And then his face does the thing that faces do, when a door that has been closed for a long time opens just a crack. Not full recognition. Not the return of everything that has been lost, but something. A flicker. A response that the clinical staff in the room, including Renata, had not predicted, and had been quietly hoping for without daring to expect. His eyes filled. Tears moved down his face, slow and quiet, while a recording of his son's voice played in a small room in suburban Detroit with a window that looked out onto a courtyard garden neither of them would ever walk through together again in quite the same way. It was not. The medical team was careful to clarify in their notes certain proof of full recognition. Dementia does not offer certainty of that kind, but it was, undeniably, a response. And for a family living inside the daily uncertainty of watching someone disappear in pieces, a response is not nothing. A response is everything they have left to hold on to. Simon had watched the video once, alone, in his office, 9 days before the taping. He had not known, until Quinn began speaking on stage tonight, that this was the same family. He thought he understood the shape of grief this audition would hold. He thought he had braced for it appropriately. He thought that was the end of what he needed to prepare for. Until tonight. Until a 16-year-old boy on a stage said the words his mother had told him years ago. Almost exactly the way Simon had heard them described in Renata's email 9 days earlier, and the two versions of the same story, the clinical one and the lived one, collided in him at once. Simon wiped his face with the back of his hand. He did not try to hide that he had done it. "Does he know you're his son when you visit?" Simon asked. His voice was unsteady, and he let it be. Quinn considered the question with the same careful honesty he had given everything else. "Sometimes," he said. "Not always. I've stopped needing him to, every time. I just go. I sit with him. Some days that's enough." Simon nodded slowly. He looked at the boy for a long moment. "I want this recorded properly," Simon said. "Not just for broadcast. I want a copy made for your mother tonight, so you can take it to him. However much of it reaches him, however much doesn't, I want him to have the chance. Share this story if it moved you. Subscribe so you never miss moments like these." The audience was on its feet. All of it. 3,000 people standing for a story that had no villain, no accident, no single terrible moment, just the slow, ordinary, devastating arithmetic of a mind going quiet by degrees, and a son who kept showing up anyway. Quinn went to the microphone. He breathed once. He closed his eyes. He opened them. He sang the song, the actual one, the 2 lines from the kindergarten assembly, expanded now into the full piece, a simple folk melody that had been sitting unfinished in family memory for 10 years because nobody had ever needed the rest of it until tonight. He sang it the way you sing something you are sending somewhere specific, not performing it outward to an audience, but aiming it, carefully, toward a chair by a window in suburban Detroit that he could picture exactly. His voice filled the Dolby Theater, clear and young and entirely without spectacle. When the last note ended, Simon Cowell pressed the golden buzzer. Gold confetti fell. Quinn stood in the center of it and did not look up at the falling gold right away. He stood very still for a moment, the way you stand when you are sending something somewhere it needs to go and waiting to see if it arrives. The recording was made that night, professionally, separate from the broadcast cut. Quinn drove it to the facility himself 2 days later. Renata Ibrahim played it for Daniel Webb during a session the following week. The family does not know, and may never know with certainty, exactly what reached him and what didn't. That uncertainty is part of what this disease takes, not just the memories themselves, but the clarity of knowing which ones survive. But somewhere in a small room with a window, a recording played, and for a few minutes a son's voice was in the room with his father again. That is not everything. It is also not nothing. Some people cry only once in their whole lives. When you find out what it was for, you understand exactly what they valued more than anything else in the world. And sometimes, even after the rest of them has started to fade, the thing they cried for is still there, waiting to be sung again.